These are my teammates Elena, Jayla, and Mary. And today we're going to talk to you about urban agriculture in Destination Rockaways, which is a neighborhood in Queens, New York, and the evaluation and geospatial analysis of the potential benefits of urban agriculture that we perform.
Okay, so we are focusing on the Hamels, Avern, Edgemere neighborhood in Queens, New York. And this is a coastal area, and it's very dense. The population is about 37,000, and the average income is about 27,000, but about 17% have an average income of about 10,000. So this is a pretty low-income area, and it's also a food desert. So that means that there's relatively little access to fresh produce in the area. There's one large chain supermarket, that's the Stop and Shop, but other than that, it's really just like small bodegas, which rarely ever have fruits and vegetables, so the quality of nutrition is really pretty low. Also, there are other areas, there are other issues such as high crime rates, high obesity rates. There's a lot of vacant lots, and in 2012, in October 2012, this area was struck by Superstorm Sandy, which caused incredible amounts of flooding and about $700 million in damage. So right now this is like a huge time for reconstruction in the area. So we feel that it's really important to make sure that the right infrastructure is there so this community can grow as much as possible. Yeah.
So when you talk about New York City, it's important to note that New York City is fundamentally a different context than many of the other contexts we've been discussing in these presentations, most of which are in developing countries. Of course, New York City is in America, so not a developing country, but we can still see that urban agriculture can be a valuable tool here as well. What we have to remember, though, is that urban agriculture as a tool is going to be applied differently in this context. So, for instance, in New York, we can rely on a sort of urban planning structure that's not always present in other cities. So our urban agriculture attempts have to work within that urban planning structure, but will also be supported by it. Also, New York City has access to advanced infrastructure like availability of water reliably, availability of energy fairly reliably, which is something that we can rely on in our development of this urban agriculture project that some other locations are not able to rely upon.
So the partner we're working with is Productive Studio. They are the people with the vision for Destination Rockaways. They work on urban mixed-use revitalization projects, which is essentially just sustainable design. They try to use passive energy-efficient building designs, permaculture principles, and they're now branching into urban agriculture, designing some greenhouses, working on this project. And their goal is economic, environmental, and social sustainability. They introduced us to two other partner organizations. You Are Never Alone, which goes by the acronym YANA, is a community aid organization that was very, very important in the efforts to organize after Sandy to have some relief and some rebuilding in the face of all of the damage. And they've been sort of crucial in providing us some information on the community and helping us identify sites for projects. Green City Force is an AmeriCorps-related organization that provides training and careers to underserved young adult populations, specifically in the green sector, so renewable energy and urban agriculture. And it's Productive's vision that Green City Force will provide the labor for these urban farms. So our role was in analyzing possible land use options for Productive to help strengthen their design for this new sustainable community in Rockaways. So we looked at 5 different land use options. One would be commercial farms, urban farm to market. The other would be a community farm, and we looked at these as sort of open field agriculture. But we also wanted to look at the role that greenhouses could play. And then we compared that to reverting land to open space or just allowing it to follow typical urban development paths. And some of these lots are already developed. So we analyzed these different land use options through some geospatial analysis, which are in green. We measured market and community connectivity, which I'll talk about next. And then we also measured the different land use options, ability to act as a storm buffer. And then we moved into some calculations to look at the financial viability and potential for job creation under all of these different scenarios, and then rounded out our analysis with some qualitative research and looked at some case studies. And this allowed us to look at the trade-offs of different options for Productif's design moving forward. And it helped us suggest to them what kind of projects they could move forward with and what sites they might target for these projects. That's what I'm going to talk about first. So with the help of Jana, we identified these blue sites. There are two very small ones that you might want to note in the very center of the map. And then Scott and I looked on Google Earth and found those purple sites that we also thought would be good possibilities for projects. You know, they're vacant, they're for sale, or they're large enough to support a decent sized farm. And our first analysis was on community connectivity. So communities were, community connectivity was really important after Sandy. There were, the Red Cross really didn't show up. It was all this Occupy Sandy movement of community centers and people in the community coming together to help each other out. And so we identified community centers, public schools, libraries, and religious centers, and then did what's called a spatial joins analysis. So how many of these points are within a quarter mile of any of these potential sites? We wanted to see how these sites could bring in some cohesiveness and some connectivity with these other community centers. And we did the same kind of analysis with market locations. So this is market defined broadly as both that stop and shop and also bodegas. So we wanted to look at how these urban farms, if they were very commercially centered or commercially focused, if they could partner with any of these markets to provide more food to, or more nutritious food to the population.
All right, the other side of our geospatial analysis was looking at how the urban farms can interact with some stormwater scenarios. So this display right here is just of the damage that Hurricane Sandy caused back in October 2012. And these dark red sites, which are most of the areas, resulted in 75% of damage on the buildings of these blocks. So the area experienced vast damage. And in rebuilding, people are looking for a more sustainable strategy in developing of this area. And so part of that, this is one of our displays of yearly flooding data, along with our sites, as you can see. And through this, this data is based off like 100-year flood data. But you can see that many of our sites are in these areas that are likely to experience a 100-year flood like this, in which it would be covered, in which the area would be covered by over 1 foot of water, and some sites closer to the bay and estuary or closer to the ocean even experience a higher likelihood of such a surge. So during the stage of redevelopment, we're kind of putting forward the idea that an open plot that would be better able to handle this flooding is a better idea than putting in new development. So this is just like a basic model of calculations of the role these agricultural plots can play in water infiltration. So here are all our different sites and the different areas of those sites. And say every site we chose was turned into an urban agriculture plot, we could experience, and based on the porosity of the soils, so the soils have a porosity of about 0.5, there could be a total water infiltration in case of a storm surge of 1 foot of water height, of a total, the soil could take in over 64,000 cubic meters of water. And comparing that to if this land was covered in concrete or asphalt or something of that porosity, the open fields allow for 12 times as much water infiltration. So if we put these urban agriculture areas in key spots closer to the bays and around areas that have historically experienced storm surge, they could play a huge role in preventing future flooding.
So what we did is take these 3 types of geospatial analysis and combined them to provide some recommendations about which plots are going to provide more benefits to both hard and soft infrastructure in the face of climate change and future storms like Sandy. So hard infrastructure meaning water infiltration. This is going to provide a direct ecosystem service to the community. And soft infrastructure meaning the community connectivity, strengthening the community and providing them resources to share with each other to sort of help rebuild or resist future storms or even gentrification, any kind of stress to the community. So the darker green sites, which are these here, these are hard to see on the whiteboard, but those would provide the most benefit. And these lighter green ones will be providing the least benefit. And then more specifically, these 2 sites here have the highest market connectivity, so they might be the most commercially viable. They're also small, so we're recommending that those could be good sites for perhaps greenhouses to provide year-round fresh produce to markets. And then, of course, they're also some of the best for community connectivity in addition to this large site here. So they're close to a lot of other community sites, so they could bring together a lot of that community energy. However, you could look at that from the opposite perspective, which is that this east side of the Rockaways has very little in terms of community centers, and perhaps a community farm would be a good way to sort of start that community building effort.
Another analysis we did using the area the data of the areas of our various sites was the economic potential and the potential for job creation that all these sites could do. And similar to what the Mexico City team found, tomatoes would be the most profitable crop, so we used that in our analysis. The majority of the yield data and revenue data came from this Cornell study on different New York crops. But in this basic model, we calculated if all the area was, say, used for corn or grain using maize, there would be very little economic productivity in the area. So if you could only generate what we estimated as 0.02 jobs per acre, because in the US corn is so cheap and it doesn't provide an economically viable profit for such an urban agriculture plot. But when we look at either tomatoes in an open field environment or tomatoes in a greenhouse, they sell for a much higher price. So if assuming if all of our plots were used for tomatoes, that would create a total revenue of over $5 million. In an open field scenario, which you break it down per acre, that would be a yearly profit of about $37,000 per acre, which could equate, just on the base assumption that a low-level job is $20,000 a year, that could create a total of 2 jobs per acre, or over about 120 jobs for the entire area. Similarly, for greenhouses, there's a much higher yield because you have twice the times in growing season, but there are also more input costs based on the need to build a structure of a greenhouse. But again, there's enough money to create a reasonable number of jobs of about 3 per acre or 170 total jobs. This is a super rough analysis on the way jobs are structured and what could be the actual potential for jobs using urban agriculture, but we just are using it for our partner organization as a statement of the potential for job creation using urban agriculture in the area.
On the more qualitative side, we looked at a lot of literature around this subject, and we considered 4 potential uses of our sites. We looked at them, all the uses, through the lens of community resilience, environmental resilience, and economic resilience. They all kind of had different benefits that they focused on. Urban development, as you might expect, mainly provided economic benefits. On the other hand, conservation land provided mainly environmental benefits, although it also had some benefits for the community. As you can see, biological diversity and storm mitigation. Community gardens also provided some, although less, environmental benefits. Some economic benefits, although it was very mixed, but they mostly provided some very good community benefits, health, crime reduction, and of course community building, as was discussed in our geospatial analysis. So we use literature to back up our qualitative analysis, but the scenario we focused on was the scenario of an urban farm.
So when we looked at urban farms, that was the model that most touched on the 3 aspects of resilience that we wanted to achieve. So they had the environmental resilience in terms of job creation. They had the the economic resilience in terms of job creation, the environmental resilience because they can provide storm mitigation and biodiversity, and also the community resilience. They can be a source of education and improvement of quality of life. And we also looked at how greenhouses could play into that because those would extend its ability to create jobs, but don't have the aspect of the environmental and the community aspects as much. So a mixture of the two would be an ideal setup.
Finally, we have a few more things we need to look into. Soil analysis for the actual implementation of the project, an analysis of legal frameworks, which will fall primarily on legal experts in the area. We'll want to work further with one of our partner organizations, Green City Forest, to figure out job creation data. And of course, lastly, and perhaps most importantly, we want to delve more into the opinions of actual community members and how they feel about this potential project, who would utilize it, and how they would utilize it. Thank you.